Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, and today marks a very important day in New Jersey politics. Today marks primary day on the Democratic side and the Republican side as they face off today through the remainder of the evening as we find out by the end of tonight who will be representing the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in New Jersey's governor election. Now, the 2025 race has come center stage on the interest points of many political figures because of the fact that New Jersey was so close in the last presidential election. Just as a quick refresher, New Jersey has always been a Democratic state. It had long time voted for the Democratic Party in every election for a very long time. For 4 decades, Democrats have relied on the electoral votes from the state of New Jersey, but in 2024, it narrowed up to being a state that was on par in terms of partisan vote share for a presidential election candidate as the state of Arizona. Arizona, which voted for Donald Trump by a margin of roughly 5.5%, New Jersey voted for Kamala Harris by a margin of roughly 5.6%. It was the closest that New Jersey had been in a very long time, going back all the way to a 3-way race in 1992, when then Governor Bill Clinton defeated President George H.W. Bush by a margin of roughly 2 points. That was with Ross Perot, an independent, on the ballot, who received roughly 16% of the vote. Now, the 2024 race was a very interesting one, also because New Jersey was never really targeted. The fact remains that Democrats were able to win New Jersey, but no one was expecting it to be so close. And then, in reality, what happened was that it was quite closer than expected. Enough so that it rang alarm bells and really reshaped the way the Democrats looked at 2025. And what happened was that Democrats decided that they needed to run their strongest. The Republican side, though, to not ignore that, has a pretty clear winner in this race. Jack Ciattarelli, who ran for governor back in 2020, who also shocked the nation when he kept the New Jersey governor's race to a margin of 3.2%, just 1 year after Joe Biden had won the state by roughly 16. It was a 13-point shift, and one that simply could not be ignored. Phil Murphy, as the incumbent Democratic governor, even with Biden being unpopular nationwide, should have been able to win in a state that his presidential counterpart won by 16 points in the last cycle by at least 10 percentage points. It made sense for there to be a drop-off of 5 to 6 points, but a 13-point swing was nothing short of monumental. So Jack Ciattarelli, being the Republican that was able to keep that race so close, has decided that he wants to run again. And with the endorsement of Donald Trump and many other prominent officials, he will more than likely win this nomination with a very sizable margin. But on the Democratic side, like I said, this wasn't just a simple race that any Democrat could run in and expect to win. When Phil Murphy ran in 2017, the expectation was that Democrats were going to win. Even though the lieutenant governor on the Republican side was running, everybody knew that that was not going to be a race that Republicans would be able to win. This time around, there's a lot of anticipation the Democrats might actually lose the governorship in New Jersey. Seeing these massive shifts from the last presidential election cycle, one has to worry that although many of these shifts did result, evidently, in a Kamala Harris victory in the state, it was still indicative of a larger change in the way that voters had perceived the Democratic Party in the state of New Jersey. While many of these voters probably couldn't stomach the idea of Donald Trump being president, although a sizable portion of them did change their votes from voting for Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024, things get very different on the gubernatorial level. And what that means is, if voters are more inclined to vote for Trump on the national level, there are certainly voters there who believe that a Republican president would be detrimental, but a Republican governor would be beneficial, that might be willing to vote for a Republican like Jack Ciattarelli in 2025, which is why Democrats again have ran practically everybody in this race. This is what many states really aspire to have in their Democratic primaries. A bench of very, very influential and well-known figures across the state. You have Steve Fulop, who is mayor of Jersey City. You have Ross Baraka, who's mayor of Newark. Josh Gottheimer, who is a current sitting U.S. representative. You have Mikey Sherrill, a current sitting U.S. representative. You have the president of the New Jersey Education Association and the former president of the New Jersey Senate. All of these candidates are people that have made names for themselves in their respective regions in New Jersey, but also a crowded primary is one that was heavily invested in on both sides and one that shows that Democrats actually are looking to find the best person in this race. And what you'll find is that on the side of Mikey Sherrill, who currently stands to be the frontrunner in this race, has received a considerable portion of endorsements from across the state. A number of other New Jersey reps, as well as a number of people that often tout themselves as being more moderate, being more independent, who believe that Mikey Sherrill can win over swaths of Trump voters from the last election cycle. And this primary will be what plays kingmaker on both sides because this race is so competitive. It isn't just going to be one that, only matters on the Democratic side or the Republican side, as we often see in many states. We do often cover primaries in states like California, for instance, that have no consequence for the actual general runoff because people know that whoever makes it to the top two from the Democratic side will win that race. The same can be said in a number of pretty traditional safe states like New Jersey at one point once was. Even in 2017, and you might remember, I actually hit 8 years on creating content on this channel, which was really exciting. We'll do something for that later on this week. But the reason I pointed out is because I remember covering the New Jersey governor's race. I remember watching, how we talked about the race, and you can find my old videos on it, where we knew it was going to be a Democrat, it was going to be Phil Murphy, and that's all that mattered. Now, there are real implications. And while I do think there are stronger candidates than others, it is no secret that Mikey Sherrill is the current frontrunner in this race. It's a very close and competitive race in some degree, especially in the general. But chances are we can bet today that it's going to be Mikey Sherrill and it's going to be Jack Ciattarelli. The interesting thing, though, is that this race has evolved quite tremendously over time. When all of these candidates jumped into the race very early on, people didn't have an immediate indication as to who they might want to vote for. When the race started off, we saw that Mikey Sherrill only had 10% support. And while she was leading the pack, you only have 1 in 10 voters saying they're voting for you. 56% were completely undecided. That number has now risen tremendously from 10 points to 28 points in an otherwise crowded race. Steve Fulop has received an increase in support from 4 to 11, Ross Baraka from 8 to 11, Gottheimer from 7 to 11, Spiller from 8 to 10, and Sweeney from 5 to 7. Or actually a reduction in support, so that's actually the opposite direction. It was moving down too fast. Point is, though, nobody has seen the increase that is necessary to stand out and do well in a crowded field besides Mikey Sherrill. And so what that means is that if I was to put money on it today, which I'm not condoning political betting, but what I am saying is that Mikey Sherrill, from my end, I think is going to win. And what I do think, too, is that she is probably one of the strongest candidates that Democrats could have in this race. Probably one of the strongest candidates that Democrats could see face-to-face to get to Jack Ciattarelli in the general election. And while there aren't many data points to really look at in 2025, this race does, pretty rightfully so, start out at a lean D characterization, where I honestly would not be shocked at the final margin, despite all this national pushback against Trump, and even though Kamala Harris, again, won it on the presidential level in the last cycle, I could very well see it being a 5 to 6 point race, if not closer, but still a Democratic victory. Because like 2021 showed us, there are things that happens in statewide and gubernatorial politics that might not necessarily be explained by presidential election vote share. But 2021 was a warning sign, not just for Democrats this time around, but also for Kamala Harris, who was the first Democrat to win New Jersey by single digits since 2004 and the closest race since 1992. And when we think about the way that people are messaging on this cycle and messaging in this primary, it's all about Trump. When you take a look at Ad Impact, which does a great job at analyzing the advertisements that are being put out, first and foremost, New Jersey's governor primary is on track to be the most expensive in New Jersey history. In fact, it's on track to be the 5th most expensive non-presidential primary on record. So this is really interesting to think about. Keeping in mind, though, a lot of top-tier candidates, but what we're finding is that on the Democratic side, huge portions of money being spent on Josh Gottheimer, Sean Spiller, Steve Fulop, but the only candidate here you'll really find, Mikey Sherrill at 4th place in ad spending, is doing a lot better. On the Republican side, again, it's always been Jack Ciattarelli's race to lose. He's not going to lose that primary, so it's very much shaping up to be a Sherrill versus Ciattarelli race. But Donald Trump mentions have been pretty tremendous. On the Republican side, you're at 71%. On the Democratic side, you're at 72%. He has been the focal point here because for Jack Ciattarelli, he's trying to capture in those voters that said, you know what? I voted for Democrats for decades, and this election I'm voting for Donald Trump. This election, I'm pushing back against my party because I don't see it moving in a direction. And when you look at the shift, when you take a look at what also is included here, the New York City mayoral election matters because New York City shifted by a lot. It was the New York region of New Jersey that shifted far more than the Philadelphia region of New Jersey. South versus North Jersey saw massive, massive changes in the way they shifted. We saw counties up in New Jersey shift all the way from being Biden plus 16 to Trump plus 3. That was all North Jersey. In South Jersey, though, 4-point shifts, 5-point shifts, 6-point shifts, roughly on par with the national shift of 6.5%. And so when I think about what might come in 2025, a very competitive race immediately comes to mind. A race that will be down to the wire and one that probably won't be accurately told to the greatest degree by polling. Because in 2021, Murphy was supposed to win by 7.8. He won by 2.8. In 2024, Kamala Harris was supposed to win in New Jersey by 17 points. Rutgers did a poll right before the election, and they're pretty strong in the state of New Jersey. Did a poll showing Kamala Harris with a 20-point advantage over Donald Trump. Even if you gave 100% of undecided voters to Donald Trump in that head-to-head race, what would you have found? Was that Donald Trump would have gotten 45% of the vote. Poll after poll had said that Harris was strong in New Jersey, and no one really polled it, right? You're looking at a snapshot between September, nearly a month and a half after the candidate switch, and November, election day, that there were 5 polls in the state. 2 of them were done by the same firm. And what they found consistently, the margins were 12, 12, 14, 20, you heard that correctly, and 17 points. She won by a margin of less than 6. This was a margin of 5.91%. Really, really insane numbers. Really, really interesting, to say the least. And while I do think New Jersey will very much be a Democratic state on the presidential level, likely in the next cycle, the governor's race, I'm not as sure of. And while I do think that Mikey Sherrill is probably the best bet for Democrats in this race, I'm not convinced that it's going to be as easy as we otherwise might think. And I will say this, in reference to the other elections that are coinciding with the 2025 gubernatorial races, we only have Virginia to really worry about too, where Virginia is on track to elect their first woman governor regardless of which nominee wins. But looking at the general election and looking at the Democratic and Republican sides, we know Abigail Spanberger will more than likely win this race. The ratings here are actually quite better for Democrats, and the polling is also seemingly better. And so I'm interested to see what happens, in the 2025 race in New Jersey, because I do think New Jersey will be closer than Virginia, and I know that might be shocking to hear, but that is our new reality. New Jersey closer than Virginia, and even if you take a look at 2024 to help ground us just a little bit more, New Jersey went to Harris by 6, 5.9%, as we saw. Virginia went to Harris by 6. And when you take a look at actual margin, you'll see Virginia being a margin of 5.8 and New Jersey being a margin of 5.9. It becomes really difficult to see, how you find difference between those two. Because even in 2016, when the vice presidential candidate for Hillary Clinton was the senator from Virginia, incumbent, not out-termed, right? Not someone who had been a long time ago, incumbent senator from Virginia. New Jersey voted for Clinton by 14.1. Virginia voted for Clinton by 5.3. In 2020, New Jersey voted for Biden by 15.9. Virginia voted for Biden by 10.1. In 2012, Obama won Virginia by 3.9, New Jersey by 17.7. In 2008, Obama won it by 6.3, New Jersey by 15.6. So looking at 2024, Virginia and New Jersey roughly on par. They're moving in directions and voting very similarly. But from the 2020 election to 2024, Virginia only swung by 4.3 less than the national average. New Jersey outperformed the national average for Trump and swung by double digits towards the Republican Party. And that's where we're at in 2025. So keep your eye out on this New Jersey governor race. It's going to be a very interesting one. It's going to be a very important one because both sides of the aisle stand to gain a lot and stand to do very well in the general election. And on the margins, it could very well be a race decided largely in this primary if Democrats nominate a strong candidate. And what we will look to in the general election is if they can maintain that dominance, the age-old Democratic victory in New Jersey, or will this be the first Republican to win the governorship since Chris Christie's election in 2009? So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.